On May 7, 1945, in a modest schoolhouse in Reims, France, a stern-faced German general named Alfred Jodl sat down to sign the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany, effectively ending World War II in Europe. It was a moment etched in history. The Third Reich's military machine, once unstoppable, crumbled under the weight of the Allied forces. Jodl, in his crisp uniform, put pen to paper, marking the end of a war that had claimed millions of lives. But here's the kicker. Less than 18 months later, this same man dangled from a noose in Nuremberg, his execution botched so badly that he suffered for 18 agonizing minutes before dying. How did a general who signed for peace end up as one of history's most reviled war criminals? And here's a twist you might not know. Years after his death, a West German court briefly declared him innocent, stirring up a storm of controversy about justice and accountability. Buckle up, history buffs. This is the wild, tragic tale of Alfred Jodl, a master strategist turned condemned figure whose story still echoes through time. Alfred Jodl came into the world on May 10, 1890, in Würzburg, Bavaria, a charming town nestled in the German Empire. His father, Johannes, was a no-nonsense artillery officer from a long line of military men, while his mother, Therese, hailed from a simple farming family. Here's a juicy detail. Jodl was born out of wedlock, a hushed-up scandal, until his parents tied the knot in 1899 after Johannes retired. Raised with his younger brother Ferdinand, who'd also climbed the military ranks, and influenced by his philosopher Uncle Friedrich, Jodl grew up in a home where duty and discipline were gospel. In July 1910, at just 20, he joined the Bavarian Army's 4th Field Artillery Regiment, eager to prove himself. World War I hit in 1914, and Jodl was thrown into the meat grinder of the Western Front. During the Battle of Saarburg, a bullet ripped through his thigh, but he patched up and was back in action by 1915, earning the Iron Cross, 2nd class. By 1918, he'd snagged the 1st class, too, a badge of honor for his grit. When the war ended, Germany was a mess, humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, which slashed its army to 100,000 men and banned rearmament. Jodl stuck with the Reichswehr, the Weimar Republic's skeleton force, and by 1932, he'd risen to major, working in the Ministry of Defense on hush-hush plans to rebuild Germany's might, thumbing his nose at Versailles. To really get Jodl, you've got to step back to 1919. The Treaty of Versailles wasn't just a peace deal. It was a gut punch to Germany. Signed in the Hall of Mirrors, it pinned World War I on Germany, stripped away 13% of its land, places like Alsace-Lorraine and chunks of Prussia, and forced it to pay billions in reparations, a debt that crippled the economy. The Rhineland was turned into a no-man's land, demilitarized to keep Germany weak, and the army was gutted, no tanks, no air force, just a shadow of its former self. For a nation that prided itself on military prowess, it was a slap in the face that burned deep. Jodl, like countless Germans, felt that sting. In the Reichswehr, he and his buddies worked under the radar, setting up fake organizations, glider clubs to train pilots, sports teams to drill infantry, all to dodge the treaty's rules. When Hitler stormed into power in 1933, vowing to tear Versailles apart and restore Germany's glory, Jodl was hooked. This wasn't just a job, it was a mission. The treaty didn't just shape policy, it bred a generation of resentment that Jodl carried into every order he'd later sign. Could a fairer deal have kept the peace? That's a question worth chewing on. Historians like Richard Overy, a big name in World War II studies, argue that Versailles was a ticking time bomb. In his book, The Road to War, Overy says it created a sense of injustice that Hitler exploited masterfully. Jodl wasn't some lone wolf. He was part of a wave of officers who saw rearmament as a patriotic duty, not a crime. But here's where opinions split. Gerhard Weinberg, another heavy hitter, counters in A World at Arms that guys like Jodl weren't just reacting, They were itching for a fight, using Versailles as an excuse to flex muscle. Public reaction back then. Germans cheered Hitler's defiance. Newspapers like Völkischer Beobachter ran headlines in 1935 praising the rebirth of the army. Americans, though, saw it differently. The New York Times warned in 1933 that Germany's moves spelled trouble. Today, history buffs on X still debate. Versailles was too harsh. One posts while another fires back. It was fair. Germany started the mess. Jodl's early career sits right in that firestorm of resentment and ambition. By the time Hitler's war machine roared to life in 1939, Jodl was primed for action. Named chief of the operations staff of the OKW, the German Armed Forces High Command, in 1939, he stepped into the inner circle, becoming Hitler's go-to strategist. Imagine this: September 1st, 1939. German panzer tanks blitz into Poland, and Jodl's plans turn it into a lightning war. Poland's carved up in a month, split with the Soviets. Then April 9th, 1940, Operation Weserübung hits. Jodl masterminds the invasion of Denmark, wrapped up in 6 hours, and Norway, a 2-month slugfest that locks down iron ore from Sweden and naval bases to choke the British fleet. His masterpiece, though, was Operation Barbarossa, launched June 22, 1941. 3 million troops, 3,000 tanks, and Jodl's playbook aimed to smash the Soviet Union and grab living space for Germany. The early gains were jaw-dropping, millions of Soviet soldiers captured, cities like Kiev and Minsk overrun. But it bogged down at Stalingrad, a catastrophe he'd seen coming. In 1942, he warned Hitler that splitting Army Group South to hit the Caucasus and Stalingrad at once was a recipe for disaster. Hitler lost it, nearly canned him, but Jodl's loyalty didn't waver. That showdown proves he wasn't a yes man, yet he stuck around. And then there were the orders that'd define him. The Commissar Order, June 6, 1941, demanding Soviet political officers be shot on sight, and the Commando Order, October 28, 1942, green-lighting the execution of Allied special forces, no trial needed. Thousands died because of those signatures, and they'd come back to bite him hard. Experts weigh in heavy here. Ian Kershaw in Hitler, Nemesis, calls Jodl a technician of war, not a visionary, suggesting he was brilliant at execution but lacked the guts to challenge Hitler's madness. Contrast that with Max Hastings, who in Inferno slams Jodl as complicit in every atrocity he signed off on. No excuses. Back in 1941, German troops cheered Barbarossa's early wins. Letters home bragged about crushing the Reds. But by 1943, with Stalingrad a graveyard, soldiers grumbled. One wrote, "The generals promised victory. Where is it?" Americans caught wind, too. Time magazine in 1942 dubbed Jodl Hitler's brain, a mix of awe and dread. Today's take? Ex-users in 2025 call him a cold-blooded planner, or just a soldier doing his job. The split's stark. That tension, genius, or monster keeps his war years electric. Jodl swore at Nuremberg he had no clue about the Holocaust. Let's unpack that. By 1941, the final solution was in full swing. 6 million Jews, plus millions of Roma, disabled people, and POWs, slaughtered in camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor. Gas chambers churned out death daily. Mass graves swallowed entire villages. As OKW chief, Jodl wasn't running the SS or designing the camps, but his war kept the system alive. Take Denmark in 1943. He okayed deporting civilians, including Jews, to German control. Many ended up in Auschwitz. In Norway, his forced evacuations and village burnings displaced tens of thousands. Some funneled into the Nazi death machine. He claimed ignorance, but OKW memos from 1942 mention special actions in the East, code for mass killings. His wife Louise later said he was shocked when he found out after the war. Was he playing dumb or truly blind? It's a dark corner to linger in. How does a guy that sharp miss the genocide his work propped up? Or did he just look the other way? Historians don't buy Jodl's line. Saul Friedlander, in The Years of Extermination, says, "Senior officers like Jodl couldn't not know. Information flowed everywhere." Timothy Snyder, in Bloodlands, points to OKW's logistics role, moving troops and supplies that enabled the Einsatzgruppen death squads. Public outrage flared post-war in 1945. The Washington Post ran survivor stories, one calling Jodl a cog in the murder wheel. Soviets were livid. Pravda branded him a butcher of millions. Today ex-posts seethe. He knew, he just didn't care. One user rages, while another muses maybe he was too busy to notice. The Holocaust's shadow over Jodl isn't just history. It's a gut-wrenching debate about denial and duty. May 1945 rolls around and the end's near. Hitler blows his brains out in his Berlin bunker on April 30th, leaving Germany in shambles. Karl Dönitz, the new head of state, picks Jodl to face the music. On May 7th, in Reims, Jodl sits across from U.S. General Dwight Eisenhower's team, including Walter Bedell Smith, and signs the unconditional surrender, Wars Done in Europe. The room's thick with tension. Jodl's stone-faced, pen steady, as he inks the Third Reich's defeat. But the Soviets aren't satisfied. They demand a second signing in Berlin on May 8th, with Wilhelm Keitel stepping up. Why the fuss? They worried about a repeat of the World War I stab-in-the-back myth, where Germans claimed they weren't beaten on the field, just betrayed at home by Jews and communists. For Jodl, it's a spotlight moment. History's watching. He might have thought he'd go down as the guy who stopped the bleeding. Nope. The Allies peg him as a cog in the Nazi murder mill. Arrested May 23rd, he's shipped off to Nuremberg. That signature didn't save him. It set the stage for his fall. November 20th, 1945, the Nuremberg trials kick off. Jodl's in the dock with 23 other Nazi heavyweights, staring down 4 charges: conspiracy to commit crimes against peace, planning and waging aggressive war, war crimes, and crimes among humanity. His defense is flimsy. "I was just following orders, didn't know about the camps." Prosecutors hit back with a stack of evidence: the commissar and commando orders, deportation records, all with his name on them. October 1st, 1946, the hammer drops, guilty on all counts. Death by hanging. October 16th in Nuremberg's prison. It's go time. U.S. hangman John C. Woods steps up, but he flubs it. The rope's too long, the drop too short. Jodl doesn't snap. He strangles, suffering for 18 minutes before choking out, "I salute you, my eternal Germany." Witnesses call it horrific, a grim, prolonged end. His body's cremated, the ashes dumped in the Isar River. No grave, no Nazi pilgrimage site. Experts dissect Nuremberg like a crime scene. Robert Jackson, the U.S. chief prosecutor, wrote in his 1946 report, "Jodl's hands were stained with the blood of his orders." Telford Taylor, another Nuremberg lawyer, later argued in The Anatomy of the Nuremberg Trials that Jodl's technical skill made him more culpable. He knew what he was doing. But not everyone agreed. German historian Joachim Fest, in the face of the Third Reich, called him a servant, not a mastermind, suggesting Nuremberg overreached. Public reaction? Americans roared approval. Life magazine's 1946 spread showed Jodl's gallows photo with the caption, "Justice prevails." Brits nodded along. The Times praised, "A necessary reckoning." Soviets fumed he didn't suffer more. Izvestia called the execution too quick for his crimes. Today, ex-users weigh in. 18 minutes wasn't enough. One snaps, while another shrugs. He was a soldier, not Hitler. Nuremberg's still a lightning rod, justice or show trial. How'd the world see it? In 1946, Germany's split. Some mourn Jodl as a dutiful soldier caught in the victor's net. Others spit on his name as a Nazi butcher. Americans, they're all in. The New York Times trumpets Nuremberg as justice done right. A 1947 poll showing 70% cheering the hangings. Soviets want no mercy. Jodl's a war criminal. End of story. Jump to 2025. An X posts ping-pong between surrender guy and Nazi scum. No nuance there. Back in the 50s, Cold War vibes softened U.S. views on German soldiers versus ideologues. But Jodl's still a lightning rod. Was he a monster or a fall guy? That's the quiet spot to mull over. Public opinion's a moving target. Dig deeper into 1946 Germany, and it's raw. In Munich, crowds gathered outside newsstands, some weeping for our boys like Jodl, others shouting, "Hang them all!" A split soul laid bare. U.S. troops stationed there wrote home about it. One GI's letter, archived at the National WW2 Museum, griped, "Germans act like they're the victims." Across the Atlantic, American families who'd lost sons in Europe, over 400,000 dead, saw Jodl's noose as payback. Chicago Tribune letters to the editor raged, "He deserved worse," one vet's widow wrote. Fast forward to the 70s and Vietnam muddies the waters. Some U.S. scholars start asking if Nuremberg was too harsh on soldiers versus planners. By 2025, X's hot takes range from "he was evil incarnate" to "a pawn in a bigger game," a debate that's never cooled off. Jodl's personal life's a saga, too. In 1913, he marries Irma von Bullion, a countess with class, and they're together 31 years, no kids, until she dies in 1944, worn out by war and sickness. April 1945, with Germany collapsing, he weds Louise von Benda, Irma's pal and his secretary, another childless union. Louise is at Nuremberg, battling for him, painting him as a soft-spoken guy who loved Mozart and history books. A letter he wrote her, dug up post-trial, hints at cracks. "I served too faithfully, perhaps too much." It's a raw glimpse, a man staring down his choices as the end nears. That loyalty to Hitler? It was his core, for good or ill, a high note of devotion in a life of chaos. What fueled Jodl? Prussian military culture, obey or bust. He grew up worshipping order, seeing war as Germany's bulwark against the Red Menace. Hitler's Lebensraumspiel, more land, more power, sold him cold. But he wasn't a mindless drone. He questioned Barbarossa's timing, sparred with Hitler over Stalingrad. Wilhelm Keitel, his boss, called him brilliant but cold in a 1945 note. Fear of Hitler's temper, a thirst to climb, and a soldier's code kept him tethered. Was he a pawn or a player? His head's a maze. Loyalty trumped everything, even when doubt crept in. Sit with that. Could he have broken free? Historians wrestle with Jodl's soul. Anthony Beaver, in the Second World War, says, "He was a product of his time. Obedience was his religion." But Norman Davies, in Europe at War, fires back. "He chose loyalty over morality. Don't romanticize it." In 1944, a junior officer under Jodl, Hans Speidel, later wrote, "He feared Hitler more than failure," a rare peek from the inside. Publicly, Germans in the 30s saw him as a rising star. Deutsche Allgemeine Zeitung praised his iron will. Americans post-war weren't so kind. Newsweek in 1945 labeled him Hitler's shadow. Today, ex-users muse, "smart guy, wrong side," or "rage. He sold his soul." Jodl's drive, duty or delusion, keeps the pot boiling. Jodl's orders left a trail of wreckage. The commissar and commando orders wiped out thousands. Soviet officers, Allied commandos, gone in a flash. In Norway, late 1944, he orders 40,000 civilians evacuated. Villages torched east of Lingenfjord to starve out Russian aid, scorched earth, pure and simple. Barbarossa's collapse at Stalingrad flips the war. His Norway grab secures resources, but breeds lifelong resentment. In Yugoslavia, his anti-partisan raids spark more resistance than they crush. These aren't footnotes. They're seismic shifts. The Allies, especially the Soviets, use his moves to justify no-quarter justice. At Nuremberg, those signed papers are his undoing, a high-stakes legacy of blood and backlash. Zoom out to the Holocaust's full horror. By war's end, 6 million Jews are dead. Gas chambers at Auschwitz churn out 2,000 bodies a day. Treblinka's pits swallow 800,000. Add millions more, Roma, disabled, POWs, exterminated in a machine of hate. Jodl's not SS not drawing up the Wannsee Conference, but his war oils the gears. Denmark's deportations, Norway's displacements, they feed the camps. OKW files from 42 nod to special actions. He knew something. Louise swears he was stunned post-war. Could he have quit? Not likely, but could he have cared? That's the gut punch. Complicity's a slow burn. Here's the shocker. February 28, 1953, a West German court clears Jodl of breaking international law. Louise is behind it, arguing he was no policymaker, just a soldier. The Allies lose it. By September it's overturned, but the spark's lit. Germans hail fairness. Americans scream whitewash. It's a firestorm. Did Nuremberg overreach, or was this German denial? The debate's still hot. A peak that keeps Jodl's name buzzing. Experts pounce on 1953. Michael Burley in the Third Reich calls it a shameful dodge. Jodl was no innocent. But David Cesarani, in Justice Delayed, wonders if Nuremberg's rush to punish left room for doubt. Germans in 53 rallied. Die Welt ran op-eds claiming Victor's justice cheated us. U.S. outrage was instant. The Washington Post blasted, a slap to every soldier who died fighting Nazis. Soviets sneered. Pravda dubbed it capitalist hypocrisy. On X today, it's a brawl. He deserved the rope. One fumes while another snaps. West Germany was right. War's messy. The 1953 twist isn't just history, it's a live wire. Jodl's hit American screens, too. The 1961 flick Judgment at Nuremberg doesn't name him, but he's in the air. Stone-faced generals facing the gavel. PBS's The War casts him as Hitler's puppet. On X, he's 18-minute hang guy, a grim meme. Why's the U.S. obsessed with his death? Not his life. It's justice porn, not insight. A quiet spot to wonder why we fixate. What if Jodl had told Hitler no in 1942? Barbarossa might have tanked early, sparing millions. What if Nuremberg let him off? A softer precedent? Fewer nooses. These aren't just thought experiments. They show how fragile history was. One guy's call could have rewritten it all. That's a wild high to ride. Nuremberg's big lesson. Just following orders doesn't cut it. Jodl's case cements that. Flash to My Lie, 1968, U.S. troops massacre Vietnamese civilians. Some dodge blame with orders. Today, the U.S. military hammers accountability into recruits. Jodl's a mirror. Where's the line between duty and right? It's a low-heavy question for 2025. Stack Jodl against Keitel. His OKW boss was Hitler's echo. Jodl made it happen, signing the death warrants. Rommel the Desert Fox fought clean, died a hero. Jodl's paper trail sank him. Nuremberg picked its targets by proof. It's a high-drama clash of guilt and grit. Jodl's tale from Reims to the gallows is a roller coaster. That 1953 not guilty twist keeps us guessing, justice or vendetta. For Americans hooked on history, he's a lens on World War II's chaos and the fight for right. Dig in, it's a story that grips and won't let go.